Welcome to the webinar. Welcome to the webinar. We've got quite a few people joining at the minute, so we'll just start in just a few more seconds. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the IAE Awards 2020 online program. We're so pleased to welcome you to the latest event in our series of online webinars designed to inspire, influence, and share environmental best practice. Today's event will be focused on tackling the problem of waste. Throughout the webinar, you can ask questions by the question and answer tab below, and then they will be answered later in the event. Recordings of all events throughout the week will be shared via e-newsletter to all attendees by Friday. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the IAE Awards, and we decided to launch a full program of free online events for you and your team to join. The aim is to engage organizations with different environmental initiatives to inspire, influence, and share best practice. This program will culminate in the IAE Awards at 4 p.m. on International Clean Air Day, which is Thursday, the 8th of October. This has been a very unsettling year for businesses, communities, and individuals. The health and sustainability of our environment has never been so critical, and the climate crisis and loss of biodiversity has been further exacerbated by the economic, health, and social challenges created by COVID. The pandemic has markedly changed business practices for the long term, and we hope that there's opportunities to improve business practices in terms of sustainability. We believe that changing workplace practices to incorporate environmental decisions into the very heart of our organizations is vital to build resilience and to create strong, sustainable businesses. So by running our events online, we're hoping to really bring people together, share learnings, a bit of inspiration, and be an example of how events can be run sustainably in the future too. If you'd like to attend any other events this week, there's still time to register your place at the IAE website. Today's talks, we'll be hearing from author Jen Gale on zero waste-ish tips for slimming your bin for the imperfectly green, really a way to get started and get inspired. She's written a book called The Sustainable-ish Living Guide. Her talk will be followed by Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage, Hugo Tagholm, who will be talking about driving systems change through grassroots activism. Their talks will be followed by a Q&A session, so you get to ask some candid questions from our speakers. And then I'll announce the IAE winner for Best Waste Reduction category. So I'd love to introduce you to a very exciting person, Jen Gale. She's the author of the Sustainable-ish Living Guide. Jen started her exciting eco-activism after her life changed following a year of buying nothing new, which is a pretty incredible effort. That year changed not only what she buys, but also how she sees her place in the world. She recognized the power that we all have as individuals to make a difference to the things that we really care about simply through our personal and daily choices. In addition to Jen's writing and also strong social media presence, she produces podcasts about all things sustainable-ish. And Jen's the author, as I mentioned, of the Sustainable-ish Living Guide, which is available now, and soon to be available, the Sustainable-ish Guide to Green Parenting, which is out in March of 2021. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Jen.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. April, tell me if people can't hear me.
I can hear you fine.
And let's see if I can now, I feel really powerful when it says I can control your screen. So I'm just going to see if it is actually working. There we go. Brilliant. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to investors in the environment for asking me. Just a very, very brief intro because April's already done one. I always say I'm just an ordinary knackered mum of two because I feel like that's a really important point, because I think sometimes when we see eco-activists or people doing amazing things, we kind of think, oh God, you know, there's no way. I certainly feel, you know, times I get overwhelmed and think, well, what can I do? How can I make a difference? I'm so busy and I'm tired and the kids are being irritating and things, but I strongly believe that we can all make a difference. So that's why I make a big point of saying I'm this ordinary knackered mum of two. And as April said, our sort of eco journey started when we spent a year buying nothing new. And before that, we're talking today about waste. And before that, I had genuinely never even thought about waste. I think that's one of the issues that we have, is that we're so lucky here in the UK and in the developed world to have a very efficient, although we whinge about our recycling and our waste collection systems a lot, we do have a very efficient waste and recycling system, and it's out of sight, out of mind, isn't it? Once it's in the bin, we don't see it anymore. But so through this year buying nothing new, I've sort of several years later now got this amazing online community, 50,000 people all together. And the important thing about is the ish in sustainability, and it's about taking imperfect eco action. Lucky enough to have been invited to do a TEDx talk during that year buying nothing new, and as April said, lucky enough to have a book published in January this year, which has been an interesting year for books coming out. I think all the sort of events and things that were supposed to be happening. So by the very nature that you're here, and you're probably well aware of the issues with rubbish, but just to put it in context a little bit, there's an amazing, really short, it's about 20-minute film by The Story of Stuff and the amazing Annie Leonard, and in there she says this stat which I kind of had to go back and replay several times to really get my head around it. But according to them, just 1% of the total materials used in production and manufacture of goods are still in use 6 months after the date of sale. 1%. So 99% of that stuff is either sat languishing somewhere not in use, or is, has been chucked away. And the fact is that, it's not just about what we're throwing away, it's the resources that we're using to make that stuff, the energy that we're using to make that stuff. And I was chatting to someone last night, and they said that, I think when we talk about carbon footprints, lots of us will think about travel and energy. We won't necessarily think about consumption and the things that we're buying. So actually, but it is all really, really connected. And we're running out of resources to make this stuff that we're then using for less than 6 months and then kind of chucking away. It's this very linear system we've got. So the average person in the UK will throw away their own body weight in rubbish every 7 weeks. Now, that's more or less shocking depending on how much weight you've gained during lockdown, I guess. Landfill sites are also a major emitter of methane, which is a greenhouse gas that's about 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And I think that when we think about stuff in landfill, we think that it sort of sits there and it rots down nicely, and then we get this lovely kind of mulchy compost or something at the end of it. And that's really not the case. When things are in landfill, because of the way that landfill sites are managed, it's an anaerobic environment, so there's no oxygen. So rather than sort of rotting and breaking down, things just kind of ferment. And even things that we would think of as really readily biodegradable, like newspapers and things. There was a documentary a couple of years ago on the BBC called The Secret Life of Landfill, and they were digging up like capped landfills, and they found, newspapers in there from the 1980s. And if you're anything like me, you'll think the 80s was only, 10 years ago, but it wasn't, was it? It was like 40 years ago. They were still completely readable. There were clothes in there that just needed a wash and they could have been worn. So this was from 40 years in landfill, and we're imagining that all these things just sort of rot away and become these benign substances, and sadly they don't. And we are, in the UK, we are running out of landfill space, and a lot of our rubbish is now going to energy from waste, which has its own set of sort of complications, shall we say. So one of the solutions, or part of the solution, I feel, is us, and how we think about waste, and more importantly, actually, how we think about things before they become waste. So I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be a waste hierarchy geek, but it turns out I am, and I absolutely love this waste hierarchy. It's an expansion on, if any of you have got kids of a certain age, you might have had Bob the Builder on in the background, and they talk about, reduce, reuse, recycle. It's probably something a lot of us were taught at school. And it's kind of an expansion on that mantra. And the idea is that we start at the bottom and we work our way up. Now, whether you're watching this webinar and you're coming from a sort of business perspective, or whether you're watching it as an individual thinking about what you can do about your waste at home, the same principles absolutely apply. And also remember that if you are here in your capacity as a business owner or an employee, we are all individuals as well. So we all have bins at home, as well as the fact that we all have bins at the office. So all of these principles are able to be applied wherever you are, really. So we're starting at the bottom and we're looking at refuse. So again, I'm probably showing my age, but just say no if anyone gets that reference to Grange Hill. I popped into the supermarket yesterday, and actually I had to queue outside. So while I was waiting in the queue, they had their Halloween display up, and there was like plastic hazard tape with pumpkins on it. There was a plastic kind of black cascadey ribbon thing with, you know, bats and stuff like that. And it's great, and it looks really exciting, and I'm sure the kids would love it. But it's single-use plastic, and at the end of the day, do we really need that to make kind of Halloween for one day? And unless you're very diligent and you roll it up really nicely and keep it somewhere safe and remember where it is next year, that's single-use plastic, and it's just going to go in the bin. So do we really need a lot of these things that we're told we need by retailers? So let's, you know, it sounds really dull, it sounds really boring. It probably is a bit dull and a bit boring, and we need to pop our sensible grown-up pants on for a little bit. But and it can be really easy to get carried away, especially, you know, we've got Christmas coming up and things like that. But let's just take a little breath, take a step back, and think, are there some things that we can refuse without our life being particularly sadder or poorer? So you know, single-use items around Halloween, around Christmas, around fireworks, around Easter, anything like that, any kind of novelty plastic. Can we refuse, you know, balloons are a really good one. I'm sure Hugo knows, you know, the issues that even though rubber balloons are, you know, biodegradable, animals don't know that when they eat them and things like that. So there are things that we can refuse that won't actually make our lives a huge amount worse. So that's the first step to think about, and that, if you notice, is the biggest layer of the waste hierarchy. I've only got 20 minutes, so this is going to be a bit of a gallop through, so bear with, and if you've got any questions, do pop them into the Q&A box. And then the next level up that waste hierarchy is reduce. And again, you know, we live in this time of convenience and consumption, and we can get pretty much anything we want, mostly pretty cheaply, probably next day if we use Amazon. So the concept of reducing is actually probably quite a kind of a difficult one, really. But, you know, so when we think about things like fast fashion, can we reduce the amount of clothes that we're buying? Can we, a lot of the time we buy, especially things like clothes or whatever, because we're bored, because we're out with family and friends. It's a bit different at the moment. I guess, you know, people probably aren't shopping so much as a kind of hobby and a pastime anymore. But, you know, again, we really do just need to take a stop and to think, oh, that's whipped on. I don't think that was me. That's magic. So I don't think I can go back. Let me see. It's beyond the remit of my capabilities, but we'll just pretend we're still looking at thank you. Thank you, magic slide person. Reduce. So you know, for things like clothes, for things like kids' toys. I mean, God, who doesn't look around, if you've got kids, who doesn't look around their house and think, where am I going to put any more toys this Christmas? And there are ways that we can do it that don't mean that we miss out or we feel we've got any less. There's brilliant like toy subscription sites. There's lots of share shops popping up around the country. So lots of ways that we can still have the things that we want and need without necessarily contributing to the volume of resources used and the volume of waste that ends up at the end of it. And when we think about things like food as well, about 30% of all food produced is wasted, and 50% of food waste occurs in the home. So is that something we can look to reduce? Can we, if you have a look in your bin and take a sort of cold hard look at what's in there, you know, are you one of those? And I think one of the most common things is that people will buy a bag of salad every week because we should be eating salad, and then at the end of the week it's gone a bit slimy and a bit moldy, and we put it in the bin and we could buy a bag of salad. And so, do you know, are there things like that you can reduce so that you're not constantly just this cycle of kind of shop to bin, which is really quite depressing when we start to think about it. Right, let me see if I can now. Okay, so reuse is the next thing up. And there's some more images there that possibly show my age. So I just love some of these upcycles, really clever, inventive things, but you don't have to be this clever or this inventive to reuse things, please believe me. Can you reuse the inner of your cereal packet to wrap your sandwiches in? Can you reuse that same inner of your cereal packet to freeze something in the freezer? Can you reuse all the ice cream tubs, margarine tubs as Tupperware and things for keeping leftovers in? Like, it doesn't have to be particularly hip or glamorous or exciting or inventive. Just start to think a little bit. Bags that we get bread in, you can use them for poo bags. You don't need to buy a poo bag. So can you reuse these things so that even if ultimately they're still ending up in the bin, they've had another life and it's prevented you from having to buy something else specifically to perform that function. So again, it is just a little bit about thinking outside the box. If you do want to get crazily inventive with reuse things like that, then Pinterest will probably be your friend. So there may be some things that you can't recycle or you can't get rid of, like floppy disks and things, and if you're inventive with a glue gun, that might be what you want to do for Christmas presents this year. So rehome, here we're talking about charity shops, but we're also really importantly not just talking about charity shops. I think the charity shops at the moment are probably absolutely inundated with all our stuff, because we've all had a bit of a clear out during lockdown, and the easiest guilt-free way to get rid of those bags of stuff that we've now decided we don't want in our house anymore is to give them to the charity shop. If you wouldn't buy it from the charity shop, don't give it to the charity shop. If something is ripped, even if it's just missing a button, they don't have the resources, the time, the volunteers to mend that and to put it on sale. So it will just go into either into the rag bag or into landfill. So all you're doing is kind of giving that guilt, passing that guilt on to somebody else. And I really strongly believe that charity shops shouldn't be kind of our panacea, if you like, for continuing to consume at the levels that we are. So as alternatives to charity shops, can you ask friends and family if they want it? I noticed quite a few households during lockdown had, just sort of boxes or tables outside their at the end of their drive saying, free, please help yourself, and people can have a rummage around in there. Check out if you've got a local free cycle or Freegal community. I guarantee you probably will. I'm in a tiny small little market town and we've got one. So look if you've got a Freegal community near you. They're brilliant communities whereby you sign up and you can post on there anything that you've got. So I always say they're really great for things like if you've opened, a big sack of dog food and the dog's decided after a bowl it doesn't like it anymore, you could probably find someone who will take that off your hands. If you've opened a tin of paint and realized it's the wrong color, you will probably find somebody on there. And you can also post wanteds on there as well. So if you've, if you're looking for, I don't know, like boys' wellies in a size 8, you can spend, 3 weeks searching the charity shops, or you can ask on there, and people, you will be amazed what the generosity that your local community will have. There's also a platform called Olio, O-L-I-O, which originally started off as a food sharing platform to share unwanted food with your community, and also you can now share kind of anything you like on there. So do check that out as well. So those are nice, easy ways for you to pass on the things that you don't want and to ensure that they stay in use. Because as I said, when we're giving stuff, especially clothes, to the charity shops, I think they are so overwhelmed and so inundated with it. It gets put in the rag bags. The rag bags form this $billion trade in textiles that crosses the globe, and it's ending up in developing countries where they don't want it now either. They too are inundated with our cheap, fast fashion, and there are mountains of clothes just sat there rotting. So, once you've done your lockdown clear out, then we need to go back to those lower levels of the waste hierarchy and think about how we can refuse, reduce, and reuse so that we're not ending up in that scenario again. So that's my little soapbox thing about rehoming. So absolutely do rehome your stuff. Really, do all you can to try and avoid landfill. But let's look at those lower levels of the hierarchy and think how we can kind of avoid that happening again. Now, when we did our year buying nothing new, I called it my make, do and mend year, and I'd never really mended anything. I learned to sew after our eldest was born, having never been particularly artsy or thought I was particularly arty or crafty. But if something needed repairing, even a button, I would just have this stash of clothes that I would save up and just sort of give to my mother-in-law to sort out when she came round to visit. So, but actually repairing is, and during that year, I was like, okay, I've called it my make, do and mend year, need to actually embrace this and mend. And I sewed on buttons, and I very inexpertly patched lots of pairs of jeans. And we're very gender stereotyped in our house, and I tend to do the textiles, and my husband does the white goods and the electricals, but he fixed the washing machine, he's fixed the dishwasher, he's fixed the toaster, all these things that I think we're told aren't made to be fixed anymore. And because relatively consumer goods are so much cheaper than they were, sometimes it just feels easier, quicker to just ditch it. But obviously there's all that, remember, there's all that embedded carbon, there's all those embedded resources in these things that we're throwing away, and they can still, our washing machine was mended with some £2 brushes. They didn't look like brushes to me, but they were called brushes from eBay after a bit of YouTubing on the behalf of my husband. So, you know, these things can often be quite easily repaired. So do have a go. YouTube is your friend. The best thing about repairing and broken things is they're already broken. You can't make it much worse. And pre-COVID, and hopefully very soon, starting up again, there are these amazing things called repair cafes. So if you go on the Repair Cafe website, which is repaircafe.org, you should be able to find a repair cafe local to you, which are pop-up events, volunteer led and run, and there will be a team of volunteer fixers on hand to help you, either to help you or to fix your things for you. So they are absolutely phenomenal. And I think, you know, they have, it's a project that started in the Netherlands and has just taken off kind of catastrophically. Hugely, not catastrophically, that's bad. And the really interesting thing to note, I think, about recycle on that hierarchy is it's almost a last resort. It's the penultimate thing on that hierarchy there. So, you know, we were told for a long time that if we were doing our recycling, we were kind of bona fide eco heroes. And actually, we're now discovering that you know, recycling is good, and I'm in no way saying don't recycle. Absolutely recycle. Check with your, you know, double check on your local council website what you can do curbside, double check what you can take to your recycling centre, have a look on TerraCycle to see what schemes they've got there. But do remember those other parts of the waste hierarchy. So when we're looking at reuse, you know, have you got your reusable coffee cup? Have you got your reusable water bottle? Have you got your, you know, if your kids like straws, can you get some reusable straws? Think about reuse all the time, and remember that reusable things are only any good if you actually remember to take them with you and reuse them. So recycling is great, but it isn't a silver bullet. It isn't an innocuous process. It involves a lot of energy, and very often things are, our perception is that things will be recycled. So you know, a plastic bottle will be melted down and made into another plastic bottle. And although that technology is kind of coming online now much more, a lot of times plastic is, especially plastic, is downcycled and made into things like park benches or fleeces. And we're discovering that actually, you know, fleeces and things like that made from plastics shed microplastics, and that in its own is its own problem. So yeah, I think the message there is don't not recycle, but have a look at that lower end of the hierarchy to see what you can do first. And then the top bit is rot. So, you know, conventionally that would mean landfill, or maybe your council does energy from waste. But don't forget that we can compost at home. We can have, if you haven't got space for a compost heap, you can have a little wormery. You can even have a little wormery indoors, and that's great for food waste, for you know, shredded paper, for cardboard, anything like that. So we can rot, and it just means that you're getting this lovely, you are genuinely then getting this lovely breakdown and this sort of composty mulch that benefits the soil and the environment hugely. That was my very quick whistle-stop tour. If you've got any questions, pop them into the Q&A. If you want to come and find out more, then there's the website and all my social details and the book. And yeah, you know, if you want me to sort of do a slower version of the waste hierarchy, then do get in touch. And I think I've got blog posts and a podcast and things like that as well. But hopefully that was useful, and some takeaways that you can take away to use at home or in the office.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jen. That was really, really interesting and really, really helpful. Okay, lovely. So that brings us to our next segment, hosted by Hugo Tagholm from Surfers Against Sewage. He's going to talk to us about driving systems change through grassroots activism. Now, Hugo is Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage, as I mentioned, which is a national marine conservation campaigning charity. The charity takes action on plastic pollution from the beachfront to the boardroom, working with hundreds of thousands of volunteers and ocean activists nationwide. It uses evidence found along the coastline and rivers to drive change in the systems, products, and attitudes towards waste. The charity takes actions from the beachfront to the front benches of Parliament as well, where it unites a voice for the ocean through its Ocean Conservation All-Party Parliamentary Group, mobilizing over 100,000 community beach and river clean volunteers annually, and it's been instrumental in helping introduce and enforce new government legislation to protect our seas. I'm just handing over control now to you, Hugo.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to talk to you today, and thanks very much to Investors in the Environment for inviting me here. And thanks to Jen for giving a great talk there. I'm Hugo. I'm the Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage, as April said, and we're a national organisation based down here in Cornwall. And I'm going to talk to you today about our campaigns. I'm going to talk to you a little bit first about the history and the frame of our organisation. We sometimes need a bit of explaining because of our somewhat esoteric title, which dates right back to 1990, some 30 years ago when we were set up. So we're a national marine conservation and campaigning charity, active right around the country from the tip of Scotland right down to Land's End. We are surfer-led. I am, for my sins, a surfer myself, and many of our volunteers, many of my team here at our headquarters are surfers or water enthusiasts. And this year is our 30th anniversary. We were established back in May 1990. Because of the chronic sewage pollution issue that was apparent right around the coastline of the UK. We do campaign from the beachfront right through to the front benches of Parliament. All of our work is really based in the experiences that our members, that the public are having on beaches, not just in Cornwall, but in every part of this country and to an extent right around the world. We're very proud that this year we announced His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales as our first ever patron, a former surfer and windsurfer himself. We represent about 400,000 people around the country, and we amplify their voice and connect their voice in the Ocean Conservation All-Party Parliamentary Group. And the sort of campaigns we run have an impact not just domestically here on the waste agenda, but around the world at conferences like Our Ocean and the UN Oceans Conference and various other established processes to tackle the biggest environmental issues that we have on planet Ocean. We've been described over the last 30 years as Britain's coolest pressure group, as some of the government's most sophisticated environmental critics, and as an organisation that gets results both on the ground and in the corridors of power. And we pride ourselves at being able to have one foot in both camps, one foot firmly with our grassroots activists at beaches everywhere, and the other foot in the corridors of power and around the table with corporate leaders who are creating change with us. I wanted to start really by talking to you a little bit about the heritage of the organisation. We were founded back in the 1990s, which was a great decade of sort of people rising up and a great decade of environmental legislation. This is an image of people protesting against the very unfair poll tax. It was a decade when we saw sweeping environmental legislation coming in from Europe, and also a decade that people were taking a stand for the environment. So we saw people chaining themselves to trees to stop bypasses being built. We saw people really taking on the mantle of trying to challenge the establishment to protect the environment and to protect people in our communities. And Surfers Against Sewage was very much part of that. It was founded down here in the Badlands of Cornwall, where we're still based today in St Agnes. And it was started by surfers who were literally sick of getting sick of going into the ocean. Raw sewage was pumped out. That was how sewage was disposed of back in the 80s and very early 90s. That was considered treatment, and that sewage pollution was putting surfers, swimmers, holiday makers, and other bathers at risk when they went into the water at our beaches. And so my predecessor started this organization and started the great campaign actions that are memorable to this day: gas masks, wetsuits, turds, and surfboards on the streets of London, Manchester, Newcastle, and on the beaches around the country. And that led to some great change. We saw, thanks to my predecessors, a great improvement in water quality over the past 30 years. We've gone from what would have been about 40% of our beaches passing the minimum standards to now what is over 90% of our beaches passing those minimum standards. So very good campaigning, very good legislation, and a very good implementation of new investment from the water companies to tackle some of that that issue. That issue is now re-emerging. So there's a big new problem with sewage pollution because some of that investment is already outdated. But that's the continuous improvements we'd always be calling for. And some of that tone that we saw from the 1990s is now coming back with groups like the climate groups, of course, Fridays for the Future, Greta Thunberg, Extinction Rebellion, starting to mobilize again, bring people together again to challenge the establishment, to challenge not just government, but businesses who are not running themselves in a sustainable way, businesses that aren't doing right for people and planet. So we're seeing a whole movement, particularly of young people, coming back together to say that they want to see change, not change in the future when they get into their careers, but change now. They want to see change from leaders of our businesses and our governments now to make sure that we create a more sustainable future and a sustainable approach right now. We've been, of course, evolving over the years. We started on sewage pollution back in 1990. I took over at SAS in 2008 to rejuvenate the organization and take it in a new direction. And we took on new issues and expanded our work across a multitude of environmental concerns, plastic pollution being one of the predominant we now work on. And back in 2008, we started to really ramp up what we were doing, to mobilize communities, to innovate campaigns, and to communicate with the public. In that year, we actually published this image, an image that actually I got quite a lot of criticism for at the time. People said, look, there'll never be that much plastic in the ocean. That's a completely impossible scenario. And sure, this is a fake picture, but ultimately it communicates very strongly, and it communicates what is a really accurate picture of plastic pollution, not just on our beaches in the UK, but in the ocean around the world, the sheer volume of plastic that is making its way into the environment. And how have we as an organization responded to that pollution, to that waste? Well, of course, we've worked on beach cleans for many years now. Since even just before 2008, we were mobilizing people, a few hundred people at the beach clean back then. And this has grown into an army of people around the country, 100,000 people taking action to pick up plastic, to remove it from the beach and do the right thing with it, to put it into the right waste streams, and to start to collect that evidence, to challenge business, to connect with government processes, to say, look, enough is enough. We need to see change, and we need to see it now. We've got a plastic pollution crisis, and it's already too big. So action is needed immediately. And there have been a couple of tipping points in the journey of the public over the last decade. And one of those was with Storm Hercules back in 2014. Now, this is a pressure chart, an animation of the weather system that was Storm Hercules. You can see the darker colors being the strength of winds that were generated at that time, the black winds being hugely powerful winds that drove a lot of plastic pollution onshore. It drove big waves onshore too. This is a picture of Sennen Cove, not far from our office, with waves from Storm Hercules crashing ashore, not far from the village. And it drove plastic pollution onto our beaches. Now, this is Perranporth Beach, one of my favorite beaches, a beach where I spend a lot of time with my family, where I surf a lot, where I've seen a lot of wildlife, dolphins, seals, basking sharks, of course, lots of seabirds. And it's also a beach that is chronically affected by plastic pollution. And this was the scene the morning after Storm Hercules, a tide line filled with single-use plastics, disposable plastics, throwaway plastics, however we want to describe them. And this date was logged firmly in the minds of activists. This is when we saw a new uprising of people who wanted to not only join us at Beach Cleans, but start new organizations, challenge businesses to do more, and start a whole new journey of campaigning. There was another big sort of moment in the journey on public consciousness for plastic pollution in the UK and around the world, and that was the Blue Planet series screened in 2017, another tipping point in public consciousness. And I had the good fortune of talking alongside James Honeybourne, the producer of Blue Planet, a couple of years ago. And one of the things out of his amazing talk, a talk where he described the creatures that he had seen, the new behaviors that he had seen and documented through the series. But what stuck with me most about his talk, that out of 7 hours of broadcasting, just 14 minutes was dedicated to plastic pollution. 14 minutes that changed how we responded to it, 14 minutes that changed how government started to respond to plastic pollution, and 14 minutes that mobilized a whole new sense of public engagement and momentum in tackling the crisis that we're seeing in our ocean. And no wonder we have a crisis. The plastic production statistics are shocking. Between 2000 and 2010, more plastic was produced than in all of time before that. And we know that plastic production figures are set to quadruple over the coming decades. So if we've got a plastic pollution crisis now, it's no doubt that we will have one in the coming decades if we don't take radical action now and radically reform how we're managing waste, how we're managing that resource back into our economy. Of course, we see terrible scenes like this sperm whale washed up, its stomach filled with plastic pollution, almost a daily occurrence that makes headline news and social media channels around our ecosystem. We do know we can't pick our way out of the problem. It would be impossible, and it's not a solution just to run beach cleans to respond to the ever-growing amount of single-use and other plastics in our environment. Because it's big business that drives the production of these new plastics, pointless plastics, plastics that should be replaced, plastics that should have a better end-of-life solution to them, plastics that should correspond to a system that is creating domestic recycling and creating a closed-loop circular economy here in the UK. We run a regular brand audit as part of our beach cleans, and a quarter of the plastic pollution we found last year was produced by just 5 multinational companies. 5 companies that are making huge profits at the expense of the planet without the right systems in place to contain and control the plastic they're producing. This film I'm about to show you, might want to turn down your volume, it's quite loud, was a call to arms that we had issued just before the screening of the Blue Planet 2 back in 2017. We issued this in the springtime of 2017. And this is a film that was actually challenging the status quo. It's called Wasteland.
We live in a dangerous time. A new superpower is rising in the Pacific. A country 5 times larger than North Korea is amassing the greatest chemical threat ever known. Yet its aggressive expansion is being ignored. Governments refuse sanctions, and leading corporations continue to profit from it. The battle for the Pacific has already been lost. But this is just the start. expanding its borders with the plastics we throw away. It threatens the entire planet. This is wasteland.
Now that film, of course, another huge dramatization, was trying to shift the responsibility away from beach cleaners and individuals back into the corporations that are profiting from creating so much single-use and avoidable plastics. It was also the launch of a new program we had called Plastic-Free Communities and Plastic-Free Coastlines, which was moving beyond the beach clean, a new 5-step program inspired by the Fair Trade Towns initiative that empowered people at a local level to connect businesses, local government, local NGOs, schools, and other stakeholders to reduce their collective plastic footprint and challenge businesses to do the same, not just at a regional level, but at a national and international level. And I'm very proud that we've got now over 700 communities representing millions of people around the UK participating in the Plastic-Free Communities program. And it's really important that all of this community movement connects with government, and we create a level playing field or level ocean for businesses to work with. We have our communities that are beach cleaning, about 100,000 people a year. We've got millions of people that come together with our Plastic-Free Communities initiative. We have about 1 million school children in our Plastic-Free Schools program. And all of that connects together into a really powerful voice that we can use to have a very positive conversation with government and business about the changes that we want to see. And we started an all-party parliamentary group, or we helped start an all-party parliamentary group back in 2014. It's now called the Ocean Conservation APPG. This was the moment that we sort of got that off the ground at 10 Downing Street back then. We delivered a petition with Ben Howard, the musician, to Downing Street, which was a big moment for us and has helped us unite the voices of various charities and organisations with politicians to seek changes that we want to see. And what are those changes? Well, I'm very proud that we worked on the plastic bag charge, which has already eliminated billions of plastic bags from circulation, a win for communities and a win for the environment. We were one of the leading and are one of the leading proponents for an all-in deposit return system that can stop the millions and millions of plastic bottles that end up in our environment, in our parks, on our streets, in our rivers and in our ocean. A deposit return system is a proven way to create a much more circular economy, a way of putting a small incentive, a small charge, as some of you will know, on a beverage container, and that will incentivize people, consumers, to do the right thing, to take that back to reverse vending machines and other points where they can give those back to get their deposit back. That creates a domestic recycling economy. It delivers very pure recyclate and is proven to, from examples around the world, to elevate recycling levels to above 95% typically. So a success for the environment, a success for the economy, and a success for people. To get that commitment for government to the deposit return system, we did a whole range of campaigns. We had 330,000 people support a petition. We took a battleship around the country made out of plastic bottles our beach cleaners had found on beaches, and we had many meetings with the Environmental Audit Committee, with government in 10 Downing Street. So we again took our campaigns right from the beachfront right through to the corridors of power to create that change. And this last couple of weeks alone, we've seen the introduction of the ban on straw stirrers and cotton bud sticks. Another campaign our volunteers, our regional reps and our members helped support. They collected evidence at the beachfront to get that through Parliament. And that will stop billions of pieces of plastic ending up in our ocean. So a big win for our ocean. And at the moment, we're seeing a pandemic, of course, and new types of plastic pollution emerging. This new video here, if it will start. There's a small video that I took just the other day when I was co-steering with my son, PPE, plastic pollution, which is a new type of single-use waste that we're seeing at most of our beaches now. So again, connecting back to Jen's talk, this just shows the need to have a much more reuse and recycle economy. So we really got to think about reusables in this context. So we're in this new decade, a decade of the ocean, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, a UN Decade of Habitat and Ecosystem Restoration. So it's crucial that we take action to stop the inputs of not just plastic, but sewage waste and other pollutants that are impacting the habitats that we love, the habitats and spaces that we use for recreation, but also the ecosystems that we might not know a lot about already. And I wanted to show you another film to sort of end the presentation called The Creature, which is touching on exactly that. So.
I think it was. I've never seen anything that looks like this. It looked like a whale, but I don't know if it was a whale. I don't know.
Like a big lump of, like a...
It looked initially like a seal, huge seal. Amazing.
Very strange.
It was hard to know whether it was alive at first. But then there was a slight wheezing.
I mean, it was amazing how everybody pulled together so quickly and did the best that they could.
Reaching in and pulling out so much stuff.
We're just trying to get her to breathe again.
The kids were incredible. They had just like this natural instinct to care for things.
It sounds bonkers, but there was...
It was kind of like a flashing.
Pulsating.
It was definitely responding to us in some way. We thought we'd saved her, but it was...
When its energy kind of went.
I think we all knew. Once the tide came up, we let it go.
And it just felt right to give it back to the sea.
So I wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts. I've just finished reading a Hemingway book, and there was one quote from it that really stuck with me that I think is very relevant to the discussion that you're having and to this day. And that's, how did you go bankrupt? 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. And this is effectively what we're doing to our environment. I think waste, we're with plastic pollution in particular, we're filling up our environment, and we are doing this without the recognition that there will be a cliff edge at some stage. So a really important quote, and I think we all have to ask ourselves if we're doing enough to shift the dial for planet ocean, because there's always more that we can do, and business as usual is killing our planet. So we do need radical reform and radical change over this next decade. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hugo. That's really a few moving videos in particular, and it really drives home the need for continued action and motivates us, I think, to beat back complacency on plastics pollution, especially during this pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure I'm trying to go. Right, so moving on to our Q&A session, we've had some interesting comments and nice questions as well here. So let's start with, is the pace of change to tackle waste sufficient to tackle the plastics pollution crisis? That's probably a question for both, but maybe starting with Hugo.
Yeah, look, I think it's this is a question I get a lot, and I think it's proven, so far to be insufficient. There is more single-use plastic waste than ever before. Our systems aren't keeping pace with the production. The systems can control that plastic are not keeping pace with the production. And Jen used the term earlier, out of sight, sort of out of mind. Now, we may live in a country that seemingly has good waste management systems, but that is of course landfilling a lot of stuff or exporting it to other countries that can't deal with it. And we often have the sort of audacity to point our fingers at those developing countries and say it's their problem. The bottom line is we do need to reduce the amount of plastic we're producing, and we need to create systems that truly are circular. So we need a materials and a systems revolution to do this. And there is a lot of corporate responsibility that we need as part of that, because at the moment the damage or the cost of our waste is externalized to ruining our environment effectively, sadly.
I don't think I can say anything more articulate or eloquent than that.
Well, we do have a question probably aimed towards you, Jen, actually, is, so in light of the scale of the issue, how do you cope with knowing that you are a small cog in the whole waste system? How do we change big business for the better? Yeah, and
I don't know if anybody's had a chance to watch David Attenborough's new Netflix, is it A Life on Our Planet? I watched it at the weekend, and at the end of it felt very small. I felt very inconsequential, and how on earth can I possibly make a difference? But I consistently come back to this point that as individuals and as a family, we can only do so much, but we can do that much. We underestimate as consumers, I think, the power of our choices. So we make choices every single day, largely unconsciously, about what we buy, about who we're giving our money to. And if we have the capacity to make different choices in terms of our budget and things like that, then I feel like we have a responsibility to do that. But I think the other thing we underestimate as individuals and as families is the power of our voices. And Hugo was saying those sort of top 5 polluting companies. Well, we can take to social media and tell them that that's not good enough. We can, not only can we not buy their products and look for reusable options, but we can also very actively, very, very loudly, if we want to, tell them that that's not good enough and that we want to give our money to other people. So, and the whole, was it this week or last week, the ban came in on plastic straws and things. That's all come bottom up. That's all come from consumer power, from this reaction to Blue Planet 2, from amazing campaigns like Surfers Against Sewage. So please don't ever feel like you're too small a cog. And I think the more conversations we can have, you know, I struggle a little bit to have conversations with friends and family around this stuff, because I feel like they're like, oh, she's off again, and like rolling their eyes at me. But these are important conversations to have, and we can do it in a very gentle, very non-judgmental way. And we can also model those behaviors for our friends and family and for our kids. So we can make it really normal to use reusables. We can ask our local coffee shop if they can watch the contactless coffee video from city to sea, you know, and if they can think about using reusables again. We have a huge amount of power, but I also think that we need to use that power to put pressure on the businesses and the corporations who have even more power.
Amazing, yes. Lots of questions and comments around getting involved, but we are short of time. So if anybody who has submitted a question, if we're not able to answer it, we will post some links on our website within the next week to follow through, both on sort of general activism and getting involved, as well as some personal choices with some of the resources that both Jen and Hugo at Surfers Against Sewage have. But one last question aimed particularly at Hugo: how can people get involved with SAS plastic pollution campaigns, especially those of us who are not lucky enough to live near the coast?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, and just to Jen's sort of point, just to follow on, I think that everyone's individual actions do count. It's really important, but the important thing is that they connect up and we create change. Lots of social change and legislative change comes when there's unrest amongst people, and they all feel the same, and they push at politicians to drive the frameworks within which businesses operate. So that's really important. So never feel sort of disempowered at any step. And that's what our job as an organisation is, to help people feel empowered and to shine a light on them. In terms of our name, in terms of being near the coast, we're not exclusive or excluding. So about 30% of our plastic-free communities are on the coastline, 30% are rural and 30% are urban. It's a really even sort of split. And they're all over the country, from Hackney and Camden Town through to sort of Sennen and Porttowan down here in Cornwall. So there's lots of different opportunities, and the toolkit is designed not as a coastal toolkit, but as a toolkit for anyone. So just come onto our website and you'll be able to find all of those resources in the step-by-step guide, and get involved with the campaigns. You can come to a beach clean or a river clean wherever you are, and you can join us at campaign actions. You can sign petitions. You can contact your MP. So lots of things you can do with SAS. We're an inclusive organisation and inclusive of all geography as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you both to you, Hugo, and to Jen. And as I said, we're going to post some resources and links to various things that you've touched on during this talk on our website in the next few days. Now it's time to announce the winner of IIE's Best Waste Reduction 2020. So a business that is putting a lot of action in place with regard to really reducing waste. So this year, as I mentioned, we're marking a decade of the IIE Awards. So in addition to bronze, silver, and green accreditation, we're also awarding IIE member organizations for going above and beyond in 8 special categories, and best waste reduction is one of those. The results will be announced throughout the week for the other categories, as well as the awards itself on Thursday. So now I'm ready to announce and celebrate as well the winner of our best waste reduction category for 2020. So what we were looking for was the best waste reduction overall, innovative or impactful action on plastics reduction, reuse and recycling, and use of circular economy principles. And the winner is Northampton General Hospital. Judges liked that Northampton General Hospital succeeded in removing most plastic cutlery and plastic straws. They also installed water fountains and introduced reusable crockery, resulting in 220,000 fewer plastic cups. So this is all, you know, an NHS trust incredibly during this time of you know, COVID and need for PPE. But their use of reusable scrub hats, over 2,000 named hats, and pioneering being one of the first trusts to do use reusable theater gowns, has also saved 1 ton of clinical waste per month. All of these actions saving significant money for the trust, improving patient safety and experience, and having remarkable environmental co-benefits. Also noteworthy was their huge staff engagement campaign, Small Action, Big Impact, which got staff to make over 800 pledges to change their own behaviors. Additional commendation goes to Perkins Engines, who was commended for a huge boost in recycling rates, reduction in process waste in manufacturing, as well as significant engagement efforts, particularly in the staff canteen, around decreasing disposables and improving food waste results and TerraCycling. So thank you everybody for attending this talk. Special thank you to Hugo and Jen for your very inspiring and engaging words. We really appreciate it. I think we're all looking for actions that we can take personally as well as within our organizations. And I know so many of our businesses are always looking at what can they do next, and getting that motivation is one of the first steps in taking action. So thank you. Our category sponsor, thank you very much for Cool Food. And our other IAE Awards sponsors for 2020, BGL Group, Ecotricity, Davies Veterinary Specialists, Green Energy Switch, Roythorn Solicitors, Crosskeys Homes, and Hunt and Coombs Solicitors. So thank you again to everyone, and stay tuned for the rest of our talks this week. This afternoon from 4 o'clock, we've got a talk given by Sustrans on sustainable transport and advocacy in improving sustainable transport in your local area. Thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.